the Packers just need to clean up these simple mistakes. The Packers were one of the worst teams in the NFL when it came to drops last season. Wicks and Reed were in the top 5 in drop percentage. Romeo Doubs was around 20th, about 23rd according to PFF, minimum 50 targets. But those guys just have to catch the football because when you have these receivers dropping balls on third down, these big moments in games where you need a conversion to keep things going, you just can't have guys dropping the ball. And so that's just something that, a little mistake that if the Packers can just improve that just a little bit, that'll go a long way. And I do think one of the reasons the Packers did add Matthew Golden was because of his ability to catch the ball. Brian Gutekunst, I was watching his post-draft press conference once again to remember what he was saying about Matthew Golden, because I love those interviews just because I feel like you get a ton of interesting information from the GM about what they saw in those guys. They've picked them now, so they're sort of sharing at least some interesting information. And Brian Gutekunst brought up the fact that Golden has such great hands. And looking at one interesting stat, he got a lot better in his final year in college, going from going to Texas in his final year. He went from a 13.3 drop percentage the year prior to 6.5%. And he also improved in a major way when it came to contested catch rate, going from 30% to 61%. And so, hearing Gutekunst talk about Matthew Golden and how he has such great hands, I assume, if you're Gutekunst trying to evaluate your roster and seeing, okay, where were we weak? What areas do we need to improve? The obvious one is the drops. And so on the one hand, you'd like to say, okay, the receivers on the roster need to play better, need to catch the ball more, obviously. But what's one other way you can solve it? Bring in a guy who has shown that he can consistently, track the football and, not have consistent drop issues. And so it's not surprising that with the Packers' struggles at receiver when it came to drops, the Gutekunst said, you know what, we need to add a guy who I'm a little more confident in when it comes to actually, catching the football. We need someone who Jordan Love can trust on third downs. And that's one other thing that Gutekunst brought up. He said that on third downs, when the corners are like mugging the receiver sort of up on them on the line, he said the Packers need to have someone he said Matthew Golden is the kind of guy where if you need a conversion on third down, like he can get open. I'm sort of paraphrasing, but that's sort of a one aspect of Golden coming in first rounder, where on third down, when Jordan Love needs to be able to have a quick option here, maybe the defense is blitzing, finding a guy quick. Matthew Golden is super good at getting open quickly. He's super fast, 4.29 40. And so there's just a lot of aspects about Matthew Golden that I'm very intrigued about. And it's like we can speculate all day, and I do think that he's going to come in and be very successful pretty quickly. Of course, there could take some time to build that chemistry between him and Jordan Love. But it's going to be really fun to sort of see how he operates in this Packers offense, not only when it comes to actually catching the ball consistently, but also one thing that I'm super intrigued about is how they use him in motion. Because I don't know if you guys have seen, how the Dolphins use Tyreek Hill, where he'll be in motion like before the snap. And when a guy's already in motion and he's insanely fast, like a Tyreek Hill, when the ball is snapped, you just have a leg up on the defenders who are just standing still. You got one guy already moving quickly. You got the defender standing still. Like, who's going to win that battle? And that's something Texas did a ton with Matthew Golden, where they had him, motioning, moving, when the ball is snapped. And I think the Packers will probably want to utilize that as well. So a lot of positives about Matthew Golden. And it's not just the receiver's fault in my mind when it comes to some of these I guess you could call it quarterback, wide receiver connection issues. Jordan Love did struggle a ton with accuracy in 2025. I do think part of that could be explained because of his injuries, when your leg's not working properly, when you have an MCL sprain groin issue, and you can't fully plant and move around like you want to. It's going to affect your accuracy. So I do think that should help if he's healthy. But he was 25th in adjusted completion percentage. Because, of course, if you look at the drops and you just look at completion percentage, those drops are going to greatly factor in to that statistic, completion percentage. But adjusted completion percentage does factor in those drops. And so even when you adjust it, he was 25th in the NFL, minimum 100 dropbacks per PFF. So that's an area where Love needs to also improve, because there were a lot of plays where a guy's open, he just sort of throws it behind him. And so I think that there's things on both sides, the receiver side and Jordan Love's side, where they need to sort of clean some things up. And even if one of those gets a lot better, that's going to drastically help this team that already is a top 10 offense, already won 11 games. And one of the final things here about cleaning up simple mistakes, looking at that Eagles game, when you start off fumbling the ball in the kickoff, you just lose the momentum immediately. And I think that momentum is so important in sports. And you think back to that Eagles game, if Nixon does not fumble the opening kickoff, who knows what could have happened? Maybe the Packers get the ball, they go down, they score, and so quickly the momentum is totally different. But when you go in and you fumble the ball to start the game, it's just like immediately it's like the air is sucked out of every fan's living room. I remember watching that game and you're just like, are we serious? We're waiting for this game. You're excited, you're ready. First kickoff, you're like, let's go. And then it's like, oh my goodness, this can't be real life. And I feel like as a player, you have to feel that same thing on the sideline, like, oh my goodness. And then it just puts you in a bad mental space, at least as a fan. I can't speak for specific players, but I assume when it starts that way, you're like, man. So clearly you want them to be mentally tough, but at the same time, the Packers just need to clean up some of these simple mistakes like that, for example. And in that game, McManus, who was very good all season long, misses a field goal after having the second best accuracy percentage all season long, 95.2%, misses one in the playoff game. So there were so many issues in that playoff game. Jordan Love's interceptions, special teams mistakes. They just got to clean up all these little mistakes.